Do you consider the end goal of content repurposing is to be everywhere? And this be everywhere approach will help you to connect, reach with, and convert more people. You know what? I don't believe that's true. Content repurposing isn't about being everywhere, and nor should it be. Keep listening to find out why. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, the founder and CEO of Content 10x. And in this episode, I'm going to dive into why simply being everywhere is not the end goal of content repurposing. And I actually think that the term can give content repurposing a bad rap, and I'll explain why. While it's obviously a good idea for content creators to post content to multiple platforms, I really believe that this process should be carefully considered, and you should make sure your content is actually being seen by the right people in the right places. So in today's episode, I will cover why being everywhere shouldn't be the end goal of content repurposing, what I think the real end goal should be, and a couple of examples of effective methods of repurposing. But before I get to the main content, just to mention, if you want weekly content repurposing tips and guidance, industry updates, inspiring stories, and exclusive news delivered straight to your email inbox, then join hundreds of marketers, business owners, and creators and become a Content 10x insider. Head to content10x.com/newsletter. Now, as you may have heard on the podcast, or if you've seen our content online, we have a content repurposing scorecard. And so far, we've been absolutely delighted with how many B2B marketers have completed it. Now, we're not quite at the point where we want to share our findings yet. We want to gather more data before we do that. But one thing is for sure from the results we've seen so far, many marketers repurpose content occasionally, but very few have an actual strategy for doing so. Now, this makes me very itchy to hear this news, but that's what I'm here to help people with, so it helps me to at least serve my purpose when I see those results come through. Now, if you've listened to this podcast before, you'll know that I preach the power of having a strong, clear content repurposing strategy. A potential downside of not having a clear repurposing strategy could be that you don't repurpose at all, or you could end up repurposing content on the fly. So posting out clips, snippets, blog posts, videos, or other content to every single social media platform and all the online platforms that exist. Now, in principle, having your content in as many places as possible sounds like a great plan. It sounds like a great idea, but it might not actually be giving your content the respect it deserves. Let me just explain with an analogy. Imagine if you run a candle company. You make tons and tons of candles and distribute them to furniture stores, lifestyle stores, supermarkets, and department stores. But imagine if you also sent them out to shoe stores, candy stores, and coffee shops as well. Now, that doesn't make sense. You'd be sending thousands of products that your staff have worked really hard on to places where they won't reach your desired customer. Why would someone who wants a pair of sneakers, a Hershey bar, or a cappuccino to have their head turned by a candle? They wouldn't, right? The candles would just be taking up space but not serving their purpose. They would be better off elsewhere. So let's apply this analogy to content. There's no doubt that you put lots of time and effort into your content. Therefore, you want that content to reach as many people within your target audience as possible. And I think that's the really, really important phrase here: people within your target audience. Not everyone, but exactly the people we are creating content for. This is why I believe a solid content repurposing strategy doesn't involve just posting content to every single platform. It needs to be carefully considered and platform specific. Yes, that's right. Content repurposing and being everywhere are not one and the same thing. A content repurposing strategy can and should always be audience focused and platform specific. For example, you know that your audience are on LinkedIn more than anywhere else, and you want your content to be focused on LinkedIn. What might that look like? Well, let's say your core content is weekly thought leadership videos that you post onto your website. Firstly, maybe you'll repurpose your video to YouTube because your LinkedIn keen audience do use Google and YouTube to search for things. So it makes total sense to include YouTube in your repurposing strategy. But then you could repurpose your video into multiple short clips for LinkedIn, along with long and short text posts for LinkedIn, graphics, maybe including an image carousel sharing the key points from the video, maybe a poll where you poll your audience on an aspect of the topic discussed, and you could also repurpose into an article. This is a brilliant example of effective repurposing, and it's a brilliant example of being audience and platform focused and not trying to be everywhere. For your audience on LinkedIn, you're trying to connect with them in the way that best suits them. Some will watch your short videos, some will read your long posts and articles, some will love to swipe through your carousel, some will just scan the short posts. This is repurposing at its finest because it's helping you share your message in different formats to help connect with your audience where they hang out. Or here's another example. If your core content is a podcast and you want to focus your repurposed content on, let's say, Twitter, you could take your podcast episodes and repurpose them into a Twitter thread, into short video tweets or audiograms, graphics, text only tweets. Maybe you could even invite your audience to discuss the topics with you from the podcast episodes on Twitter Spaces. Having said that, I'm definitely not saying you have to concentrate your repurposed content onto just one platform. But what I'm trying to do is just dispel the myth or the misunderstanding that repurposing is being everywhere. It's being where it counts. Perhaps you have an audience on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and so you could combine the two examples that I just provided. But no, you're not trying to add TikTok in there, or Instagram, or Snapchat, or Facebook. Now, I know you might be thinking that you could end up sounding repetitive on the platforms, but that's where you have to look at the different angles of how to share the points that you want to make. There's a whole separate episode on that topic, but it's all about looking at the different angles and the creative ways that you can share the same message and how you can repurpose that. Now, at Content 10x, we repurpose our content, which is this weekly podcast, into a blog post for our website, which then gets repurposed onto medium.com if we see fit for that particular topic. We also create repurposed content from each episode for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. So I suppose you could say we are trying to be everywhere, but that's not the case because we don't have the same focus across each channel. LinkedIn is our social focus, followed by Twitter. Some of it is a bit more experimental, like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. And there is the fact that we are a creative agency that specialise in content repurposing. So, of course, we're always looking at what works on platforms and getting stuck in and just, running experiments and testing things as well. So don't focus on what others are doing either. Know your content, know your audience, and look to find ways to reach them where they are by being smart with your creation, repurposing, and distribution. Conversely, if you're putting time and effort into getting your content onto loads and loads of platforms and being everywhere, you're using time which could be better spent honing the content itself, getting to know your audience even more, and brainstorming new, exciting content ideas. Ultimately, I'd recommend figuring out where your audience are spending most of their time, identifying what content works best on those platforms, and creating bespoke content repurposing plans that will maximize your content's return on investment and really make the most of the platforms that mean the most to you. So there you have it. I do hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode and it has inspired you to create incredible platform-specific repurposed content made with your audience in mind. And hopefully implementing this process will save you time and effort in the future. If you're looking for help with content repurposing, we may just be what you need. At Content 10x, our end-to-end fully done for you content repurposing services are aligned with your content strategy. We help you to maximize your video and audio content. So if you have a podcast, video series, webinars, live, hybrid, in-person events, head to content10x.com/services to learn how we can help you. And please do give us a follow on social media. We're at Content10x on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And you can find lots of action on our LinkedIn page at Content10x on LinkedIn. And do look for me, Amy Woods, and connect with me over on LinkedIn. And if you do, leave me a note and let me know that you listen to the podcast. Okay, all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.